Our mini-series, Unprecedented, where we take advantage of the fatigue over the use of the word unprecedented and use it as a series title. Last week, we looked at the unprecedented work of God in our life in 2020. Unprecedented because we haven't had the experience, many of us in our lifetime, of living through something like COVID-19, a global pandemic. And yet we discovered that for God, this is not new, that people would suffer and that Jesus is still Lord despite all of that. And so we heard some great sharing from people as they started to, and I'm sure we're still all processing what it means to walk through this kind of present that we have found ourselves in. And what it means for us to look for God in the broken places of our lives. And I sense that we might even have discovered more about who we are this year because of it. This week we continue and we move our focus somewhat from 2020, but still having it in view, still having the sense of God's provision in view. And we turn our eyes towards 2021. And we ask ourselves the question, what is it that God has maybe been stirring up in us as we think about the future? Something that we haven't got that used to this year, thinking too far ahead. But we're going to do that and think through what it might look like, dream through what it might look like for us, Session Community, the village, Session Community, the church, to continue to do life together in this community of Howick, and to continue to be a part of life encountering truth for the people that we know. And so we're going to do a bit of a kind of a rewind, and as part of this, spend a little bit of time in Nehemiah, which was the series that kind of launched us out of lockdown 1.0. And so Kristen's going to come and read and take us back to those halcyon days of lockdown 1.0.
Nehemiah 1. In late autumn, in the month of Kislev, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes' reign, I was at the fortress of Susa. Hanani, one of my brothers, came to visit me with some other men who had just arrived from Judah. I asked them about the Jews who had returned there from captivity and about how things were going in Jerusalem. They said to me, "Things are not going well for those who return to the province of Judah. They are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem has been torn down, and the gates have been destroyed by fire." When I heard this, I sat down and wept. In fact, for days I mourned, fasted, and prayed to the God of heaven.
Thanks, Kristen. When we came out of lockdown 1.0, we started dreaming about what God's grand design for us might be, what a new normal might look like. Another phrase that I think we've got heartily sick of. And it turned out that for much of the world around us, the new normal looked pretty much the same as the old normal. We discovered that we were not as safe as we thought we were. We were a bit more smug than we realized we were. And before we knew it, we were in lockdown 2.0. This time, there was a new normal. This time, after lockdown 2.0, there was a new normal, a deep fatigue, a sense of being over it. And if we were not careful, this it that we were over would become everything we experienced, even if it was not legitimately a part of it. The over it phenomenon was even more contagious than COVID-19. It's really hard to dream when you're over it. It's really hard to think of a future. Nightmares come a lot more easy than do dreams. It's hard to care when you're over it. It's safer to build walls in the 20th century. A phrase was coined, thank you, to identify a particular generation of people. And they were called the greatest generation. And members of this generation came of age during the Great Depression and then went on to fight in World War II, many of them, as well as contributing to the war effort on the home front. And these men and women fought not for fame nor recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. They had a vision for what was needed in a time of great peril. And while they may well have been over it, and I'm sure they were most of the time, mostly what they demonstrated was that they were over themselves. Getting past ourselves continues to be the greatest challenge for the human condition. But it's something that we do together. The writer of Proverbs knew this when he wrote in Proverbs 29:18, where there is no vision, the people perish. In other words, where there is no compelling picture of the future, people often drift into an over it state that leads to a place where peoples and families and communities do not flourish. I quite like the NIV translation of this verse. Where there is no revelation, people cast off restraint. In other words, where there is no compelling picture that God is leading us towards, anything goes. We just do whatever takes our fancy. We live without limits in the present. And so often we're tempted to just cast off any sense of restraint and live for the present. And when you're over it, it's a totally understandable response. So the pathway for us out of the over it mindset is to seek out what God is revealing to us and to move into that together. Because vision is not like the charge of the light brigade. Anyone know how that ended up? Badly. Very badly. It was a compelling picture of the future. It was just the wrong picture. A lot of people died. The village, though, moves together and leaves no one behind, because it takes a village to move into this post-over-it reality. Will you pray with me? Father God, as we re-encounter some of where we've been with Nehemiah, as we reflect on where you've been taking us, as we have what we shared last week, story in our ears, as we begin to ask you to help us dream dreams of the future, would your Spirit just visit us? Would we have a sense of your will and your presence and your nature? Would you guide us? Would you inspire us? Would you fill us? Would you dare to allow us to dream? We ask it in the name of Jesus. So I thought that we would take just a moment to reflect a little bit on the grand designs, some of the things that came out of the grand designs series, some of the insights that we grasp, that as we walk through it, they seem to stand out and grab attention. And it seemed that from the beginning of the series, and Kristen really just read from this part of the insight, that the foundations were important for Nehemiah. And for me, Nehemiah, the foundation of all that followed was that his heart was broken for the broken walls of Jerusalem. His heart was broken. And when I heard these things, he says in verse 4, I sat down and I wept. Have you ever wept for a city? Or wept for a place? This is what Nehemiah did. And what came to us out of this experience was that you and I must also learn to weep. And compassion, which lies at the heart of this weeping, is hard won. Compassion is birthed in us when the Father's heart for his children becomes our heart. And our hearts are only shaped by time spent with the Father, wrestling with our responses to the darkness that our world often offers. Broken hearts for broken walls. This was the foundation of Nehemiah's journey. But he didn't just stop with compassion, he also took the path of confession. He named the sins of Israel. He took responsibility, even though it was not something that he had personally done. For Nehemiah, right action proceeds from a right heart. And if compassion is what moves us, confession is what grounds us. If compassion is what moves us, then it's confession that grounds us. It helps us to acknowledge our own part in the challenges we face individually and as communities. It allows us to be shaped in spite of our blind spots and preconceptions. It allows us to speak and to act from a place of humility and love. See, too often I think we are wired towards disinterest, apathy, or isolation, moving aside, or even blaming and shaming others. Our reactions are often to dismiss it. Is that really true? Is that really happening? Or to minimize. It can't be that bad, surely. Or to avoid shame. You don't mean me, do you? To blame others. You've brought this on yourself. Or even to overindulge, to binge on outrage. Outrage can be just another tool for externalizing our inner conflicts. And for Nehemiah, it was confession before profession. In other words, it was owning responsibility for who he was and his part in the shaping of his community before it was talking big talk. It was confession before profession, and maybe even confession before obsession, but that's a whole other story. Nehemiah dreams of walls restored, of a city restored, of a community rebuilt. He dreams of people being restored from a place of exile, then being brought into this vibrant relationship with God and experiencing the favor and the presence of God in everyday life. And his attitude to walls was profound, because for Nehemiah, walls served many different functions. Walls provided shelter for those who needed an oasis, who needed respite from the elements, from the circumstances of life. Walls provided a place of belonging, a place to experience and express the deep need that we each have for human intimacy, for community, to learn to love our neighbors. Loving our neighbors is not just a command, it's actually a need. It's actually a part of how we're wired to be. Walls provide protection, especially from those who seek to harm. And one of the things that a community like us needs to do is to assess the threat level in the community around us. Who's in danger? Who needs help? Who needs support? And finally, walls provide a place to proclaim from. See, walls offer a foundation on which to stand and to speak to those on one side of the walls and those on the other side of the walls. And this was how Nehemiah and the community used the walls that they were erecting. So our posture is the same, is to invite people into places of shelter, places of belonging, places of protection. And our proclamation is Jesus, who has come into the world to save us. So with the testimonies that were shared last week, and reflecting and recapping on some of what we took from Nehemiah as we came out of lockdown 1.0, as leadership have processed and wrestled with some of the realities that face our communities, that face us as a church, what does 2021 look like? What does it look like for the village to dream? Well, number one, we need to party on. We need to party on. We need to learn to celebrate. This is something that is a deep part of church culture. I think we've done lament pretty well this year. Maybe we've learned some things about lament. That's not a bad thing. Often it's the last thing we lean into. But a part of what we need to do is to celebrate and to draw others into that celebration. We need to learn to celebrate the work of God among us more than we celebrate pointing out the shortfalls of others. More than we enjoy pointing out the not yet parts of our reality, the things that we're still working towards. More than we might even point out the discomfort of sacrifice. And how is it that we can do this? Because, you see, it's generally speaking, this is how human communities work. If something's hard, you look for someone to blame. That's what you do. If something's hard, you look for someone to blame, pointing out the shortfalls of others. If something's hard, we focus on the negative rather than what God is doing amongst us. If something's hard, we focus on our own level of discomfort more than we focus on what's happening. And celebration calls us back to the why, because celebration is the discipline of seeing God already at work in our midst. That's what celebration offers us. It offers us a glimpse into those moments where we see our vision, life encountering truth being fulfilled, where we see real people who are living real lives encounter Jesus, have that light bulb moment, that epiphany moment as they encounter the most truthful person they will ever encounter. And so we need to party on as we see the work of God amongst us, in people and in the work that and mission that we feel called to. And so we'll be celebrating. A real practical implication, if you want to just check out your calendar and your email, we thought we'd add an extra week of celebration into our January calendar. So we're going to have more fun in January. Yeah, I see the worship team and the chow team. You see, they're going to get in touch with their why over summer and they'll be fine again. But we're going to celebrate a bit more, take some time, and invite other people into the celebration as we do those things. Second thing, party on. Second thing, we're going to turn it up. We're going to turn it up. Whenever we are having a community conversation, we will amplify what we are doing. Whether it's a sermon series, whether it's a parenting seminar, whether it's a life skills course, whenever we're having a conversation about what it means to flourish as human beings, we're going to turn it up. Some years ago, when I was young, single, and well paid, I was kind of hoping that, no, I wasn't hoping that any of those were, no, I don't know. None of them are true today. No, I'm not young, I'm not single, I'm not well paid. It's all good. But I'm happy. I'm really happy. Years ago, I decided to buy an amplifier, like a really decent amplifier for my stereo system. And as I was giving it plenty in the lounge, I couldn't believe at how awesome the sound was. And then my flatmate came into the room and he talked to me. And I couldn't hear him. Now, you might go, well, it's because you had the stereo turned up really loud. But here's the thing. This amplifier was so good, so free of distortion at high volume. It wasn't hurting my ears in the slightest. It sounded just normal, natural, and it was easy to listen to. It wasn't until someone tried to speak to me that I realized how hard it was to actually hear someone. When you amplify something properly, that's what you get. You get clarity. You get clarity and volume. And that's what we're going to do when we turn it up. We want to create clarity and volume. Understanding our why a lot more. Every time we're having a community conversation, being really clear with each other why we're bothering. What's the purpose of it? How does it link to people that you know? How does it link to your own lives? So that we can amplify it in terms of clarity and connect it to other people's stories. And secondly, we want to be louder. We want to get the word out a lot more. We think we've got something good going on here. We want to share it more widely. There's a few specific things that we're going to do in this area. One, Katie. Hi, Katie. So sorry you can't be with us. Katie has been working on what we're calling the Village Project for a few months now. And the Village Project is a project that will take our entire interaction with our community, whether it's through our services, whether it's through our community work, even our small group resources and children's resources. We'll be able to take all of that and to move it into an online or digital space whenever it makes sense to do that. That's the Village Project, so that people can continue to be connected regardless of the circumstances around us. And whether that's a COVID-19 reality or whether that's just a simple, simply getting disillusioned with some of the current channels for social media, where you have to be connected to certain channels in order to get information. What if the Village Project gave you that information and gave you that information, that access without having to deal with all the other stuff? So the Village Project, going digital, going online, so that all of what we do can be amplified in the digital space. Secondly, we want to make sure that we empower each other to engage much more deeply with the flow of our conversations. Now, I was reminded that back in the day, we would regularly hand out physical invites to sermon series where we felt that they had a real edge. And okay, we'd put the occasional Facebook event up, and it's not that they were doing nothing, but what does it look like for us to amplify what we're doing in that space? To be much more consistent in putting in our hands the opportunities that we can connect other people to. And we want to remember and share the why much more than we do. Because it's the why which comes from celebrating, looking for God's activity in the world, that connects us much more deeply, allows us to push through when times are hard, to be people that are responding to vision and revelation rather than people who are perishing, casting off restraint, moving into the over it mindset. Third thing, we want to go deep, go wide. We want to go deep, go wide. We want to go deeper with others so that we can take Jesus wider. We want to create opportunities for each one of us to become more involved in the lives of people that we know. One of the things that we're doing as a national movement is we have a strategy that is supporting this. And so next year we will be actually spending time as a church community looking at what it means to be actively involved in the lives of others and what it means for us to proclaim Jesus in the context of those relationships through word, through action, through love, through compassion, and through presenting the good news when it makes sense to do that. Our national movement together, it has a crossings strategy that it's doing next year, that whenever anyone in any one of our churches makes a commitment to Jesus, we're all going to hear about it. The whole movement is going to hear about it. One of the things that we're quite excited to do is to start conversations with churches and say, what would it look like for your church community to grow by 5%? But that 5% to be solely people who are starting a relationship with Jesus. And just think about that in a tangible way. Currently, Session Community's worshiping community, this might shock you, is actually 120 people call Session Community home. Some are online, hey guys. But what we suffer from at the moment is a real regularity crisis. And we know that because we've been counting since we've been out of lockdown. We know exactly what the patterns are now. But there's 120 people. What's 5% of 120? Thank you, 6. Who was that? Good. Oh, well done. Does 6 people seem like a otherworldly kind of goal to you? Does it seem impossible that 6 people might be drawn into a relationship with Christ through our relationships and efforts and care and love? I don't think so. I think with the right kind of intentionality and actually working together and learning to trust what God has given us, that this is something that we could really see. The 5%, by the way, is not a target to whip us with. It's to free up how we're thinking and to allow us to ask the question, what would it take? What would we have to do differently? What things that we're already doing would we want to do more of? Are there things that are distracting us that let's just stop doing that? That's what that's designed to do. We're not trying to turn us into a sausage kind of making machine where we just churn out people, but to start a process that frees us up and helps us to think about how we might see more people encounter Jesus. Number 4, we want to live in time. This is something that we've been doing and reflecting on for a while, but we don't think it's become any less important. In fact, if anything, lockdowns, COVID-19 has taught us more about the importance of having rhythm in life. That it's spiritual rhythms and other rhythms that underpin our health and well-being when we're under pressure. And so we want to continue that journey together. We want to take the learnings that we got from the first half of the emotionally healthy spirituality course, bank those, but we want to continue with the second part of the series next year and to make that something that we take really seriously so that we can be actually people who live freer because we have dealt with some of the stuff in our lives and that we are able to live more in time with Jesus. Finally, you'll be pleased to know, we want to get smaller so we can grow bigger. One of the things that Session Community has been known for in the past and still is, but seems to us to be a value that we want to really revisit, is what it means for us to do community in smaller groups. And right now, we have some amazing small groups, and some of the testimonies that have come out of those groups through lockdown are astonishing. But what does it look like for us to make small group environments, maybe even customize small group environments, because it takes different shaped groups for different shaped people in terms of availability and schedule. Whether it's a more traditional cell group, whether it's mentoring clusters, what would it look like for every person in the church community to have the opportunity to be a part of a smaller group environment and for that to be extended to others? Right now, we actually have small groups that are involving people who don't show up here. That is their entry point to beginning to be discipled. It's always been how Session Community was. In 2004, when we started, 10% of people that were a part of our regular worshiping community were in small groups only and didn't come to the main gathering. It's a high number. And it was somewhat situational and somewhat circumstantial, but it was a positive thing because it's not all on the service. It's not all on Sunday. And we want to continue to see that play out in a real way. And we're doing this really well in some parts of the church, but not in other parts, not across the board. And so one of the things that's a part of this picture, this is an area where we're doing it well, is in children's ministry. Because that's a part of it's part of the engine of our children's ministry is the small group work they do. But we need to invest more in that. We need to invest more in the hours that we're paying for ministry, but we also need more people to get involved so that our kids have much more customized age group opportunities. Right now, the age groups that they are meeting in are way too wide. And that's only going to get worse as the church grows. It's going to become unmanageable. It already is unmanageable. Sarah's doing an amazing job managing it. But we need to move from a management space to that being something that's really flourishing. So we need to invest more in children's ministry in that way. We need to invest a lot more in youth ministry because our small group ministry is something that we're not currently seeing great results in youth ministry. And again, that's going to require people to be a part of that. Because you see, it takes a village, right? It takes a village to raise young people. And so we need to find ways to be part of that. And there is a financial part of that as well. It's not only individuals and volunteers, it's also getting the right staffing, which I'll talk about in a minute. But if we're going to involve people in smaller groups, and for that to be a part of kind of the lifeblood of the church, we're going to need to make space in our own lives so that we can make space for others. Small groups don't just happen by accident. They almost always happen intentionally. So those are the 5 kind of areas that we're dreaming about, that the village is dreaming about in 2021. Some of the, how do we turn some of these dreams into reality? Well, first thing I want to suggest is that a mindset refresh is needed. Some of how we talk about who we are and what we're about. Some of what is top of mind as we think about what it is that God has called us to. That we need to understand that we are a village, that this is something that extending the reach of the village in 2021 is something that we would love to see happen. It's not about numbers, it's not about size, it's about individual lives being changed in the same way that we've experienced. And so there's a mindset change, there's a mindset refresh that we need to work on together. And my sense of it is that this starts with our Advent series next week. What does it look like for us? The series is called The Weary World Rejoices. Some of you will know where that line comes from. What does it look like for the weary world to pivot to rejoicing? That's a mindset change. And I'm not talking about happy clappy Jesus. Nobody got time for that. I'm talking about deep inner joy. Secondly, it does take a team. Someone asked me whether, because I'm now the national superintendent, somehow that's going to take the shine off my sense of call to session community. It's a good question, right? Some of you have been thinking about it, but you just didn't ask it. I think it's a great question. I'm going to tell you that I have never been more passionate about the mission of the local church than I am today. So don't worry about that. But things are going to be different. We are going to need help. We are going to need to find different ways to work. It's going to require all of us as we increase our reach, as the village reaches more people. So there are opportunities for fresh involvement, for different ways of engaging. And I think that's kind of freeing as much as anything. Part of that is the faithfulness of our congregation. And you know, our tithes, year on year, our tithes are currently $2,000 for the year ahead of where they were at an equivalent time last year. That's, to me, that's astonishing that we would be in that place. And so God has continued to provide for us, and he's used many of you as conduits of his blessing to allow ministry and mission to continue, really in an unbroken way. And some of you will know how much of a load our staff took on during lockdown. And for them to not have to worry about the money was a huge issue. So thank you for that. It's huge. Moving forward, some of the things that we want to fund, we can only fund out of tithe offerings. That they're not, we can't ask the government to give Sarah more money to indoctrinate children. I just don't do that, right? There are some parts of our ministry together that we need to trust God for the funding. So there is plenty of opportunity for you to jump on board if you're not already, to become a financial partner with the church, because it will make a huge difference as we begin to say, as we track towards the end of the year and start to make staffing decisions into the new year. It'll make a huge difference if you jump on board. It really will. And we would love to invite you to do that. So there'll be a way that you can do that in an email that's coming out this week. I have to say, I really need something from you in terms of our trust finances. And it's not money. I mean, you can give the trust money if you want. We can give you a donation receipt to the trust just as easily as we can to the church. But we really need you to pray for the current funding applications that we are preparing at the moment. Some of the applications that we are doing right now will be foundational to our ability to continue what we're currently doing. That alone is something that I would value your prayers on. But we're also making applications to allow us to do some of the new things that we're feeling called to do, like the Village Project. We would love to get that off the ground, but it's going to require some external funding. These are moments of great faith and trust. I don't know if you've ever written a funding application. They are probably the most thankless tasks in the world. You slave over them, and then you sort of, your mouse hesitates over the OK button, and then you submit it. And normally at that point I pray, like, I haven't stuffed it up, God. And then you wait. So I really value your prayer, because so much of what we're going to be doing requires that. So I'd love if we could maybe take that opportunity right now, and just at your tables, if you could take just a few moments to pray for our church, to pray for our future, to pray for 2021. And then we'll continue in our worship. Melissa will come and lead us in Holy Communion, and we'll sing together. So take a few minutes at your tables to pray as we conclude as a village, praying as a village, because the village that prays together. Let's pray.
On the night Jesus was betrayed, he took bread. And he broke it, saying, "This is my body, broken for you." And he took the cup and said, "This is the covenant, new covenant in my blood. Whenever you drink this, do this in remembrance of me." I invite you to come and gather round this table. And that as we do, whether we're doing it in our homes or whether we're doing it here in this place, that as we do it, we gather as that village. We do it as community. As we receive these gifts, we receive the body of Christ. We become the body of Christ. You can come as you feel ready, and our worship team are going to continue to lead us in worship as we do that.
I could just sit and wait for all your goodness, hope to feel your presence. And I could just stay right where I am and hope to feel something again. I could hold on to who I am and never let you change me from the inside. And I could be safe here in your arms and never leave. Never let these walls down, but you have called me higher. You have called me deeper, and I'll go where you lead me. You have called me higher. You have called me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me, Lord. You lead me. You lead me, Lord. I could hold on to who I am and never let you change me from the inside. I could be safe, I could be safe here in your arms and never leave. Never let these walls down, but you have called me higher. You have called me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me, Lord. You have called me higher. You have called me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me, Lord. You lead me. And I will be yours. yours for all my life. And I will be yours. I will be yours for all my life. And I will be yours. I will be yours for all my life. So let your mercy. I will be yours. I will be yours for all my life. So let your mercy light the path before me. For you have called me higher. You have called me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me, Lord. You have called me higher. You have called me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me, Lord. You have called me higher. You have called me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me, Lord. You have called me higher. You have called me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me, Lord. Will you lead me? Will you lead me, Lord? Will you lead me? Will you lead me? Through our next couple of songs, the table is open. I'm not sure if our children will come in and join us, but they will be here soon, I think, too. And just hope that tonight is allowing yourself to just be blessed and be a blessing to the Lord. And just thinking as we go from here, the walls, what our walls make up Session Community, and God surrounding us, the shelter, the belonging, the protection, seeing our community, actually seeing our community and proclaiming from these walls. Maybe there's something in your heart that is being stirred within what Brett's talked about tonight with the church, something that you know that God, it might be saying to you or nudging you, to know that we are not children of fear and that we have a God who loves us and embraces us and to ask us to be brave and to step forward for him. You called me out upon the waters, the great unknown, where feet may fail. And there I find you in the mystery, and oceans deep, my faith will stand. And I will call upon your name and keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul in breath in your embrace. I am yours, you are mine. Your grace abounds in deepest waters. Your sovereign hand will be my guide. Where feet may fail and fear surround me, you never oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace, for I am yours. You are mine. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. I will call upon your name and keep my eyes above the waves. My soul will rest in your embrace. I am yours. You are mine. Thank you for being a part of tonight. Thank you for being a part of this year. And thank you for dreaming with us looking into the next year. We're so glad that you joined us. Thank you for joining us online. And we hope that you guys have a great week as you ponder what it might mean to be a part of these walls and proclaiming from these walls all that our God is. So we hope that you have a great week. Thank you.